I've been covering the new version of Warzone in a lot of depth recently, and I've been impressed with a lot of the changes and quality of life focus that has come in the integration of Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone. And whilst I was in LA for Call of Duty Next, there was actually a really brilliant segment by the guys over at Raven Software, where the head of the studio effectively walked in and said, "Here's all the things you don't like, and here's how we're going to fix them." And that was a really promising part of the presentation. Just the fact that they were confident in what they were doing, confident in the fact that they were fixing things for their player base, and confident that they were bringing something that we actually wanted to play. But now that I've had some more time to digest everything that I've seen from the Call of Duty Next experience, I wanted to talk to you guys today about a few of the concerns I have. These are a few issues that I've had a bit of a think about and things that I feel really need solving before December and Season 1. Some of them are fairly small and unsubstantial issues, but are things that are worth fixing, and others are sort of major overarching concerns. Now, with only just a limited amount of gameplay, it's difficult to be 100% accurate about these concerns, and some of them I'm certain are being tracked or are already in tracking with the guys at Raven Software. Some of them that I'm going to be speaking on are ones they themselves even addressed at the event. Like you've seen in my other content, on the whole, I'm pretty happy with the Warzone experience I played, and I think it's pushing the game in a really positive direction. But I think all of these things can be undermined by very minimal frustrations if there are too many of them, and very major frustrations if certain systems don't work well. So the first big concern is the player count and map density. Now, this is something that they did say that they're keeping an eye on in terms of circle timings, circle collapse, and the game actually fitting the expectation of the amount of action that you get in the game. But we played with 100 players at this event, and I felt like it was too low already. Now, I don't know if that was just a limitation of the event, being as there were 200 of us there and it made sense to have 2 games of 100 players running simultaneously, but it already didn't feel like enough. Now, naturally, some of that will be down to people changing settings, trying to fix their loadouts and guns, and fix the systems that they were on at the event, but even in a game that was kind of full-flowing and felt like a natural game, I really felt as though there was a player count concern. The map is somewhere around the size of a map that's in between Caldera and in between Al Mazrah, so it's a fairly decently large map. But the thing about this map is the density. There is a high number of buildings, a huge amount of detail, and every single point of interest has crazy things going on like cave systems, underground waterways, flanking routes, and things that are additive layers to an already fairly dense map. And when you combine a fairly decently sized map with high density of buildings, then the concern is how often you'll actually run into players. This is an early concern, and I'll be more interested to see how it plays out when the game actually releases, but I feel a player count closer to 120 would be a safe bet on launch, and then sort of scale it up or down from there. At the end of the day, the player count doesn't really matter so long as A, server stability is good, and B, the intensity of gameplay is preserved. Speaking of server performance and server stability, that leads me on to point number 2. This has to be a focus going into the new Call of Duty. The hit reg that we've played in multiplayer, the general feeling of the gunplay has felt so much better, and that would be completely demolished and completely ruined if we found ourselves in yet another Warzone game where the refresh rate of the server is low, where ping spikes are frequent, where packet bursts and packet overwhelming scenarios are common, and this has to be a priority for the new Warzone. The server stability and performance that we had at the beginning of Warzone 2 during the peak of artificial intelligence, strongholds, and black sites was the worst I think I've ever seen in a battle royale. It's definitely better now, but there are still instances where server performance is a huge concern, especially considering how much the player count has also dropped since the release of the game. Concern number 3 is the manual gas mask. There is an ability to put the gas mask on manually by equipping it inside your inventory, but I feel as though this system that they have right now isn't super intuitive. You can unequip and equip the gas mask whenever you please. However, the problem that I'm noticing with this system fairly early on is that it's a lot of fumbling around your inventory to get the gas mask on, which I think is going to get a lot of people killed. I would really like it if the gas mask was its own dedicated backpack slot, and it was the first slot that your interface automatically selected whenever you were in your inventory. This would mean that you would effectively be able to press 2 buttons and instantly have your gas mask equipped, rather than fumbling around the various inventory slots, and allow for really fluid use of the gas mask without having to add a bunch of extra keybinds, a bunch of random interface protocols, just a single gas mask button, a single gas mask switch inside your inventory, and that would be the perfect fix. I really like the manual gas mask, but there really needs to be a dedicated slot for it. The fourth concern of mine is the general fluidity of the game. A lot of people noticed there was a small delay when coming out of the slide mechanism, and that's something that I feel needs to be completely deleted. It is something you can address in Modern Warfare 3 with certain amounts of equipment, but the equipment system is not carrying over. So ultimately, I feel as though that mechanic needs to operate differently in Warzone. There doesn't need to be a delay there. Likewise, there were still a couple of scenarios, whether it was coming off of zip lines horizontal or vertical, or mantling over certain objects, where I still felt it was a little bit too slow. The horizontal ziplines in particular had a really prolonged animation, and whilst it did feel as though that animation was still fairly early, I think most people were just looking for general speed and fluidity. So I really feel as though they should just give all of these animations one more pass over and make sure that they feel tight and compact in a way that they would expect. The new Warzone movement feels its most incredible when you get these sort of moments where you can string together pieces of movement, whether that's mantling over objects, crouch sliding, cancelling a reload and trying anything in between. When you can string some of those together, you get that real fluid motion, and that fluid motion and feeling is what really defines this game for me. So if they could keep going over that and making sure things are all as they expect, then I feel as though the game will be in an even better place. The fifth concern for me is a fairly major one, and that is Ricochet anti-cheat. Towards the end of the life cycle over the current Warzone and the current Modern Warfare 2 iteration, I've seen instances where Ricochet just simply isn't working. I would hope that simply just because they're working on the new game and working on the integration for Modern Warfare 3, but there've been a number of instances where a cheater who is blatantly aimbotting and effectively rage hacking isn't being banned live, even after a manual report. And I feel like that's a big concern. We're talking about players who are surely lighting up the system across the board on Ricochet anti-cheat and making it fairly clear that they are cheating. And we've seen a number of them in Warzone Ranked as well over the last few weeks too. Players who have fairly obvious clips which clearly demonstrate that they are not legitimate players, existing in the top 250 ranking system for a good amount of time. And honestly, it is just a sore spot for me going into the next game. The anti-cheat feels like it has months where it's incredible and months where it's being completely battered. While I understand that's part of an anti-cheat system, for me personally, I think we need to see more consistency on this front and more obvious tagging of accounts who are obviously cheating. The next concern for me is some of the floor loot. We've seen some of the floor loot systems so far where we have this sort of splurge loot on the floor, and I'm not too sure how well this system is working. I feel as though it's quite difficult to identify certain items on the floor, and I feel like some of the floating loot made a little bit more sense in the past. And I think maybe they need to mess around with certain items' appearances, how they appear on the ground, and in what kind of angle and position they appear, to make things more easily identifiable. This is something that I feel is definitely worth messing around with, but one of the simplest things I feel as though the game needs is a contextual inventory pickup. Meaning not only does ammunition automatically get picked up, but plates are automatically picked up to an extent. And the other one for me is just picking up things that my character might not have. So for example, if I run over a plate vest that I don't have a vest, I would like that to be automatically picked up. If I run over a gas mask and I don't have a gas mask, I'd like it auto picked up, and even perk packages if I don't have perks equipped. These are really simplistic things that, in my opinion, would put you more in the action and less juggling around with loot, and if you needed to drop those items or distribute them, you could fairly easily do that when you get some downtime. I think you want the game to kind of focus in a sense where, in the uptime and when you're fighting and moving between squads, things are just passively being sorted out for you, but in the downtime, that's when you can go through organization in a way that's not troublesome and not annoying for the flow of gameplay. The final concern I have is probably my biggest concern for the future of Warzone, and it's the integration with Modern Warfare 2. I understand why they're doing this, and I understand what they're seeking to achieve from this, but this is a big task, and there are some things for me that need to be done correctly or dealt with. In my opinion, I honestly wish they weren't integrating at all beyond maybe operator skins. I wish we weren't having all of these weapons added to the game. because in the past these integrations have often been messy and often haven't worked well. The first thing for me is the weapon overhaul. Modern Warfare 3 weapons by default have less visual recoil, less barrel smoke, less gun smoke, etc., meaning that they are better weapons for keyboard and mouse players. This is a good thing because it's been a needed and necessary change from the visual clutter that we've seen in Modern Warfare 2. But it means that if the Modern Warfare 2 weapons don't have that change, they ultimately get forced obsolescence, where they aren't as good as the Modern Warfare 3 weapons and won't be worth using. This happened in the late days of the Verdansk era, Caldera era, where the Vanguard weapons and the Cold War weapons had better mobility than the Modern Warfare 2019 weapons. Character skins, in my opinion, are also a major concern. We currently have this evil Groot skin, which is basically impossible to see, and will be even more difficult to see on the new map, as well as the Black Noir skin, and we also just generally have a concern with lighting compared to some of these operators, and how their visibility is going to interact in this new setting. I honestly feel as though making sure these weapons are operating correctly, and making sure these skins are actually things you can see, is a major priority that might end up putting a dampener on day one if it isn't done correctly. So folks, that's it for all of my concerns with the new Warzone as somebody who's played it at Call of Duty Next and has lots of footage on it. I'm interested to see your thoughts and feelings in the comment section below. Feel free to comment down below and I will reply to those down there. And make sure you drop a like and subscribe as well for everything Call of Duty Warzone and everything Modern Warfare 3 over the next couple of months.